Damian Parson of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast is here today. He's going to give us his insight into who's capitalizing the most on this year's evaluation period and much, much more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bucs Nation? Welcome to today's episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app on your Roku or Amazon Fire Stick. And we thank you for making us your first listener, your first view of the day. I'm David Harrison, staff writer at BucsGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. My co-host James Yarko, the deputy editor of BucsNation.com, part of SBNation.com, not here for today's episode, but you can find him on Twitter at JYarko_Bucs. I am at DHarrison82, and the show is at Locked On Bucs. Today, we've got Damian Parson of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast here to talk NFL Draft, of course, but specifically overall, and then we're going to get into some Buccaneers stuff as well. So let's get right over to my conversation with Damian. Joined now on the Locked On Bucs podcast by Damian Parson on Twitter at DP_NFL, national scout for the Draft Network, host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast here on the illustrious Locked On Podcast Network. Damian, I know you're grinding. I know you're grinding away. Just got back from Indianapolis. Overall, there were some changes this year, right? Like the bench press was moved, media was loud in the stadium for the workouts. What'd you think of the total experience in Indianapolis this year?
I think the experience was great, man. You know, you had fans there. It was very, if not, I won't say it felt like game day, but I'm pretty sure some players approached it as such. Like you think about like the moment where during the QB drills where A-Rich and CJ Stroud were going throw for throw in the deep ball, and you got the fans cheering, right? Like A-Rich uncorks a bomb, and then CJ hears the crowd get loud. He's like, okay. And, you know, it amps things up, man. It just felt like a really cool environment. Like, yeah, you don't talk much during the 40s, but the other stuff, man, it was fun. So I liked the experience. I feel like they should kind of lean into it more and allow the fans to cheer and get it, because nothing these players are going to do is going to be done in silence. All right. Like you know what I mean? Like you may shoot free throws at practice in an empty gym, but when you go on the road, it's loud. So you better get used to it. Right. So I think that's the main thing, is just like, it was a cool experience for sure. I think it was the right move, and it's a move they should continue going forward.
Absolutely. Great stuff there. And it does. I was only there for the head coach and GM interviews. And then I headed back home and even watched it on TV. The NFL Network guys even said, like, you know, they're surprised by the noise a little bit because they're not used to it, but it does. It adds another layer to the coverage. Now, the combine, of course, a lot of people say there's three major events in the draft evaluation process. The Senior Bowl is one, the Scouting Combine is another, and then Pro Days, which are getting ready to start kicking off, are kind of the three big events. We're 2/3 of the way through that so far, obviously. So you've had a lot of time. You watched a lot of tape in season, and obviously a lot of time to spend on these guys. So far, who stands out to you as a guy who's really building their draft status through this evaluation process?
Oh, man, I mean, of course, you know, Anthony Richardson really coming into the season as a little bit of an unknown for a lot of draft evaluators until about week one when he played Utah, and they knocked off Utah. He had the crazy 2-point conversion with the Jordan pump spin midair and then through the 2-point conversion to the tight end and whatnot and things of that nature. So he became a draft darling with guys. You know, you looked at the size, the height, weight, the speed, and the arm talent. It's like, okay, if we feel Justin Herbert was built in the lab, I don't know what we think Anthony Richardson was built in, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's built like something that you would do on Madden as a quarterback. So a guy like him building his name up. Christian Gonzalez, man, transferred the cornerback out of Oregon, transferred from Colorado. And for my first exposure to him was over the summer. And I watched him against Drake May when he was at USC in 2021. And he played him well. Like, yeah, Drake May was able to kind of body him on some plays like a power forward. But you're talking about a guy who has arguably the best coverage skills in this class at the cornerback position, in a deep cornerback class. I think he's really, really stood out this entire college football season. And then going to the combine, jumping high, running fast, just doing everything, checking those boxes, I like to say, check the obvious boxes, right? Like if it's a box that we expect you to check it. You know, if you're a 4-3, like, unfortunately, which, you know, it's not bad, but Jalen Hyatt, right? Like, he didn't check the box we expected him to check, We thought 4.3. We're hearing world-class speed. 4.41 is plenty fast. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But like when people are hyping you up as that the only trait you have is speed, and you're not 4.3, you're not 4.33, 4.32. Okay, I was a little underwhelmed, but it's like check those obvious boxes. And Christian Gonzalez did every bit of that. Devin Witherspoon from Illinois, another corner who came into like people didn't even know how talented that secondary in Illinois was. Him, Sidney Brown, like Jartavius Martin, all those guys tested well. They looked good in field drills. They did a great job down. Sidney Brown was there, of course, in Mobile, and he really showcased his full skill set and then tested well also. So I think those three guys, and then of course you think about Deonte Banks and the kids from Maryland, Banks and Jacorian Bennett, two guys that a lot of people didn't talk about much coming into the season, but man, did they have great seasons. And then of course handling the off season well. Jacorian going down, making big plays in the Senior Bowl game. I think he had a pick 6 in that game. And then, of course, both of them testing sub 4.4, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's big time. So it's, of course, it's defensive ridden because there's a ton of defenders in this class. It's a defensive heavy class, but the defense shine, throughout the season and in the off season circuit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned someone I've just recently kind of begun acquainting myself with is Maryland cornerback Deonte Banks. I saw Justin Mello over at TDN wrote something about him being a cornerback who should be in that first round conversation, kind of with the guys like Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon, Joey Porter Jr., and so forth. Do you agree with that sentiment? Should Deonte Banks be a first round conversation cornerback?
Yes, I think I haven't finished this deep dive yet, but my guy Keith, who's my co-host over at Locked On NFL Draft, he has him in his region, so he spoke well of this young man, and then being able to see him up and close and personal. I think he weighed in like he measured and weighed in like 6'1", 6'2", over two, like right around 200, maybe a little over. But like just watching this kid move, right, the sub 4.4, the 4.3 and the 40, the speed's there. He's a press man corner from what I've seen from him. And I really like that, and to have that speed and be a press man corner is big time because, you can kind of play the cat and mouse game. You can be patient. You don't have to just be physical and really try to wrestle receivers in the contact window. You can just soft press those guys, be patient, let them dictate, let them do all the head fakes they want at the line of scrimmage, and when they release it to the stem, you get hands-on and squeeze them. So he's impressed me for what I've seen. I can't wait to finish the deep dive of this young man, but I do think he deserves to be in round 1.
Absolutely. And then Mello mentioned that there was a comp out there about Banks to Jamel Dean. Of course, Buccaneers fans are very familiar with Jamel Dean. We expect to lose him from the Buccaneers roster in free agency, unfortunately. But hey, if Deonte Banks compares nicely to Jamel Dean, then who wouldn't love to see another Jamel join Todd Bowles' defense? Today's episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and the calories, then you've got to try Built Bar. With Built, healthy is actually tasty, and they're so delicious you're not even going to realize that they're good for you because they're all covered in 100% real chocolate and come in amazing flavors like peanut butter brownie, all while maintaining those amazing macros you're looking for. They only have 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but they bring you 17 grams of protein. And for years, we've been telling you to go to Built.com, get your Built Bars through the mail, but now you don't have to wait for the mail. You can go to Walmart and get yourself a 4-bar box of some amazing flavors, or you can go to Sam's Club and get yourself a 13-bar box of some amazing flavors. Of course, if you still want to, you can go online, go to Built.com, even more options in the flavor category like gluten-free brownie batter puff and the all-new mint brownie puff. Whatever your preference is, grab yourself a Built Bar, built different. Damian Parsons, national scout for the Draft Network, one of the hosts of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast here on this network, on Twitter at @DP_NFL. Joining us here today talking, of course, NFL Draft's right around the corner. Damian, I've been pushing the tight end narrative recently on my show, and I've got a little bit of pushback. People really like Cade Otton, but look, I like Cade Otton too. I just don't necessarily believe that Cade Otton has shown enough to be the guy, and I think that in a class as talented as this one, you still take a shot at a guy, and you know what? If Cade wins, if the other guy wins, either way, you end up with a really good tight end. So let me start with this. Who is your top 3, and in what order do you have those 3 top tight ends?
My top 3 is Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, and Luke Musgrave. And the order has changed frequently as I continue to watch tape on these guys. It's seeing Luke Musgrave in person. Right now it is Dalton Kincaid at 1, Luke Musgrave at 2, and Michael Mayer at 3. Michael Mayer, I think for everybody knows who he is and what he's capable of. I think the ceiling to me is vastly limited. And the comps have been thrown around is Jason Witten. I love Jason Witten, Hall of Fame type of career. Would Jason Witten have the success he's had throughout his career in this day and age with all the athleticism? It's a different game now. So I want guys. For me, it's just a personal preference. Dalton Kincaid probably has the best receiving package out of all these guys. Great route runner, gets in and out of his breaks very well, quick, has speed, plays the ball at the highest point, knows how to find soft spots in zones, beat man-to-man coverage, and, of course, win in the red zone as well. He could do all of those things. He's got to improve as a blocker, but I think he competes enough to where it's just like, hey, technical things and maybe getting a little functionally stronger. Luke Musgrave is 6'6" to the T. I was seeing him up close and personal. He looks great when you visually. 6'6", about 250, and he can move. He what I'm saying, he got that tall, knows how to drop his hips better than expected. But just when he opens that, he's like a gazelle galloping, man. When he opens that stride, he can pull away and make plays at all three levels of the defense as a receiving option. And I feel like, we haven't seen a lot of him throughout college. But I just believe that this young man has a high ceiling to where you get him into a vertical offense that's going to let him stress the seams, the skinny posts, the go routes, and the corners. Like, you're going to create some issues for defenses with him, especially if you have other weapons, involved.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely one of my favorites. And I mean, the thought of having Kincaid and Cade Otton on the field at the same time. I mean, Kyle Trask, you couldn't ask for much more help. And then you got Mike Evans and, oh, by the way, Chris Godwin is out there as well. So, I mean, right. If Kyle Trask can't get it done with those weapons, then it may not ever happen for him. Another guy that's been picking up a lot of steam, at least in social media circles and fan circles, is Darnell Washington, tight end out of Georgia. Do you think he'd be a fit in Tampa, kind of considering that new offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, is coming out of Seattle, and we expect – he's really tightly bonded with Pete Carroll, so we expect a lot of those flavors to transfer directly over. And then, of course, you do have a young quarterback in Kyle Trask. Could he potentially fit in there if not one of those top three guys?
I think he could, and I think he could be had in the second round where he tested well. He looks phenomenal. I stood close by him, and I'm like, yeah, that's 6'5", 6'6" for sure. Like, you know what I mean? Big boy, big body guy, and he was very lean. And the thing about he's the best blocking tight end in his class. So we hear the term that's recycled over and over again. He's like a 6 offensive lineman. That's legitimate. When you watch him on tape, he moves guys, man. And really just kind of displaces guys and helps in the run game. And when thinking about starting a young quarterback like Kyle Trask, what do you want to do? Lean on the run game, control the clock, give him play action pass, and Darnell Washington will help with that. Then his ability to leak out off of tight end delays, attack the seam vertically off, especially off those. You think back to Tom Brady in New England with Gronk, right? Like, Gronk wasn't the most athletic and explosive athlete in the straight line. But when you get that run game going, you start play action faking, and then you come off of it, guys are making that false step forward. Now you got a big 6'6", 6'7", 260-pound tight end rumbling up the seams wide open, and you just put a helmet higher, let him go make the play and things of that nature. You think what he can do in the red zone, man, there's plays he makes like 6'4" safeties look small, and he just catches the ball over him. So I think from a receiving standpoint, he was underutilized. So I don't even think he's like a finished product as a receiving threat. Like, you want to use him up the seams. You want to use him in the quick game. Let him get the yards at the contact, after the catch and whatnot. Crossers and tight end delays, over routes. You can do different things like that with him. He's not going to be the most fluid mover, of course, because he is a big, muscular guy. But I think he could fit for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. The more I see of him, the more I like him. You kind of mentioned that extra offensive lineman, and I think that's part of the appeal when you're looking at the Buccaneers. They've obviously got some work they need to do on their offensive line, and now even more work because they released their veteran Donovan Smith, who up and down throughout his career, but at least is a very consistent presence on the team. Very, very healthy, very, very available type of tackle. So when you look at the draft, and obviously there's still a lot of work to be done, and a lot of signings are going to kind of change some of these trajectories. But if the draft were happening this weekend and the Buccaneers are staying at number 19, where do you think the ceiling is? Who's the best tackle they could possibly hope to get to try to replace Donovan Smith in this year's class?
Man, I would think at 19, hopeful is kind of a strong hope. It's like a Broderick Jones out of Georgia. 6'4", 300 pounds, good arm length. He's hit like 19 miles per hour on the GPS. He's physical. He reminds me of so much of Ike Ekwonu, who was like the 6th overall pick last year to Carolina. He reminds me so much of that young man, and we saw how great he became with more reps in his arsenal to be able to really get the lay of the land as a young rookie offensive tackle playing every game, right? If not him, like you think about Darnell Wright from Tennessee. Darnell is viewed as a right tackle because he played right tackle this year, but in 2021 he played left tackle. He only moved to the right because they had a young freshman that they had to get on the field because of how talented he was. So it was like now they have 2 bookend tackles essentially, and just that inside that side-to-side flexibility he gives you, but strong guy can really help in the run game. And he gets out of his stance very well, gets enough depth, protects the inside shade and the inside leverage or the inside track against guys who want to counter the speed rush to, cut across the face. He does that well. I think he could be a guy in play at 19. And then you think about potentially a Paris Johnson, more of the athletic type. Really good athlete, played right guard in 2021, so he gives you flexibility there. Good feet, strong, but he's got strength, but he has to continue to add strength because he's still young, so he still hasn't grown into his development to his fully grown man body, where he has that full strength of being a 24, 25-year-old grown man. But I think he's a really talented guy, and that's someone that you potentially could get at 19.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you real quick. So Luke Gedeke, and I don't know how much work you did on him leading up to last year's draft, right? He was a right tackle in college for most part. The Buccaneers decided to try him out at left guard. Kind of looked good early on, but then he also got worked. Now his leadership, right, is his head should have kind of come out and said, look, he faced a lot of like top 3, top 5 3-techs, so don't murder him too much. We think he's kind of getting a little bit of an unfair bill there. But now the conversation hasn't been confirmed, but we're kind of looking at, do the Buccaneers potentially try him back out at right tackle where he was in college and now give him that shot in the National Football League? Do you think that's something that could possibly work? And I know, again, you're not a Buccaneers beat writer, so it's not like you studied Gedeke in his rookie year per se, but just the experience of starting a guy in the NFL inside and trying to kick him outside. Is that something that you think is feasible? Or is that almost like, okay, we're just kind of grasping at straws to see if maybe he can stick before we cut him loose?
It is feasible, but you have to be careful more so from the aspect of, hindering his development, and it's like, because the movements are different. It's one, playing right tackle, you're on an island. I always talk about it, man. Like the 2 toughest positions to play in football is tackle and corner, because you're expected to play on the island versus a better athlete that's getting the charge at you, and you have to retreat and stay within in range and within phase. So I think you really have to be careful with like moving him too much. I feel like this: if he's really comfortable at guard, you're comfortable with him at guard, I leave him there, because it's for me. Regardless of who plays quarterback, if you can solidify the interior, you can have a comfortable quarterback. You know what I mean? To where now, okay, I understand what we have. All right, he's at guard. We have our 3 interior offensive line set up. Now, we have to worry about our tackles, and I think that's the biggest key. Is like if he's comfortable, I would not. For me, from what I saw from him, I did like the limited stuff I saw from him live in games at kick down inside. I say you run him there again. The main thing is getting the best 5 on the field, right? So whether it's Tristan Wirfs, a rookie left tackle, Gedeke at guard, or wherever, Tristan at left, Gedeke at right, and then you get somebody else to throw at guard. You find your best 5 and you roll with that, because that's going to allow them to gain that cohesiveness, and you want to find that early, so those guys can get cohesiveness early in camp, where they can communicate well, they see things the same, and they're just a well-oiled unit.
Coming up next, we're wrapping up our conversation with Damian Parson of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast right here on today's episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Damian Parson, national scout of the Draft Network, host of Locked On NFL Draft podcast on Twitter at DP_NFL, joining us here on Locked On Bucs to talk, obviously, NFL Draft. Damian, your post-combine mock draft, you sent Brian Branch out of Alabama to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 19. Can you talk about kind of that pick and why you went there, and then kind of what that projection for Brian Branch in the NFL could look like?
Yeah, one thing for Todd Bowles, like having corners is big, having safeties is big as well. And Brian Branch, even though he was listed as a corner for some odd reason at the combine, he's a safety and he fits. You know what you have with Antoine Winfield, and it just gives you that flexibility, man. Two like high instinct, impactful ball players in the back end of your defense. Both can play. You can play too high. You can rotate one down, playing the nickel. You can rotate the other one down, playing the nickel. You can do a lot of different things, and it allows you also to where you can run some 3 safety sets if you like, right? If you have another strong safety that you want to play too high, but your nickel corner doesn't tackle well on first and second down, you could bring a Brian Branch down and he'll be +1 in the run game and give you some of that as well. So that's why I was like, you know what? Like quarterback is a need, but I want to continue to build up this defense and get Todd Bowles back into his bag and allow him to just be as creative as possible with multiple defenders and DBs to disguise coverages. Because at the end of the day, you want Patrick Mahomes to hold the ball as long as possible, right? You want Dak Prescott to hold the ball as long as possible. Whoever it is at quarterback that's in your way from getting to the Super Bowl, you want these guys to hold the ball as long as possible. So disguising and creating coverages that will do that pre-snap. Always talk about changing the picture. Show them a nice sunny beach pre-snap, right? And then show them a blizzard post-snap where it's like it's not comfortable.
I love that. I love that analogy. That's beautiful. And then you have Derek Hall in the second round out of Auburn, also heading to the Buccaneers. This is an edge guy, and again, I like to consider myself a smart football guy, but you study these guys, for a living. So is he a stand-up only kind of guy? Because that's kind of what I feel like. So you're talking about mixing him in there with Shaq Barrett, Anthony Nelson, and Joe Tryon-Schwenker. Or is there a little bit of scheme versatility where maybe in an even front he could drop down?
Yeah, he can do a little bit of both. He's really athletic, explosive guy. I think he ran sub 4.6, like 4.55 or something like that at the combine. But he's somebody that can play his hand in the dirt. He can stand him up, and they even dropped him off in coverage. I prefer him going forward, of course, so that he can really impact the passer. But now I talked to one of his former defensive line coaches, and he said, man, he takes setting the run personal. It's like, man, this is a guy that you really want to have on first and second down for sure, because he's going to make sure the tight ends, he's going to close that gap. He's going to, maintain leverage. He's going to block shed guys. There was a rep in team drills down in Mobile versus Luke Musgrave, where they were doing low red zone, probably about the 10-yard line. They tried to run in Derek Hall's direction, and you just saw how quickly he got his hands fit into the chest of Luke Musgrave, how quickly he threw Luke Musgrave, who is 6'6", 250, 255, to the ground, right? So he understands how to play with leverage. And one thing I love about him too, like listening to him and talking with him down in Indy, he said that he's worked on his game so much in terms of adding counters, because he loves the speed to power with the long arm. He loves that. And he's like, it works. And when it works, perfect. He said, but when it didn't work, I got stuck on blocks. And so having that self-awareness, I say this all the time, man. I want a prospect that's self-aware. When we ask, what's the problem? Like, what it is, what's going on? How can you improve? I don't want to hear you say, well, nothing really. Like, that lets me know that you're not really watching your own game. And so like he was very aware of that. So I think he could be a big asset to the defensive front. And again, just being flexible, right? Maybe you slide Tryon down ahead of the guard, and you got Derek Hall, you got Shaq Barrett, and then you got big boy Vita Vea, right there at the 1 or the 3 tech, and now you got you a loaded pass rush with a lot of length and athleticism and power to really collapse the pocket.
Absolutely. We know that's something that Todd Bowles wants to get. Vita Vea leading the team in sacks is not something that they want to have happen.
Not what you really want to do.
Love it for Vita, and especially contract time, love it for Vita, but don't love it for everybody else. Great talking draft with you. Damian Parson on Twitter at @DP_NFL. Make sure you're giving him a follow if you're not already. National scout for the Draft Network, host of Locked On NFL Draft podcast. So make sure you're checking out him and Coach K, Keith Sanchez, on the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. And of course, at thedraftnetwork.com. Damian, appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Once again, a big shout out to Damian Parson of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast and the Draft Network. Of course, thanks again to him for joining us. Thank all of you for joining us for this conversation, this episode, making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view of the day. For your second, if you like Damian, want more of Damian, head over to the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Find him and Keith Sanchez providing in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into the sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We will be back with another Mock Draft Monday episode, all leading into legal tampering opening up Monday afternoon. So hang with us. Hold on tight. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be wild. Unfortunately, the Buccaneers probably going to lose some guys, and it's going to be interesting to see where those names wind up, and see if the Buccaneers can retain any of their own talent. If you've got mock drafts, we've got a whole lot of mock drafts. In fact, guys, Monday might just be all Bucs fans mock drafts because we've got so many. We want to get as many through as we possibly can. Keep sending them in either to the Gmail inbox, lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com, or you can DM them to us at lockedonbucks on Twitter. For James Yarko, I'm David Harris. Until we speak again, make sure you're checking out everything we're writing at bucksgameday.com and at bucksnation.com. Also find us on Twitter at JYarko_Bucks, at DHarrison82, and again at Locked On Bucks. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, fire the cannons. Thank you for joining me right here on Locked On Bucks.